before we take a break for however long that will be. But we're going to learn today's Mishnah. There's what to say. Doug, did you do any writing since yesterday?
Rabbi, actually, Susan's not here because she's out back with a friend of hers who was a colleague almost 50 years ago at the University of Minnesota. So she's not, that's the reason she's not here.
Okay.
But I'm here because I feel like something I might have said in my story yesterday could have been offensive.
Oh,
if that's the case, I want to sincerely apologize for that, because that was, I just felt very badly that maybe inadvertently I said something, but I'm very sorry if anybody took offense at any of that.
Well, I am happy that it inspires people, and we want this to be a safe space for everybody. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is the way in which I think we need to shift the language from creating safe spaces to abolishing unsafe spaces. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done in trying to recognize that what for one person feels like a need might be for somebody else might have the opposite need. So I think it's always healthy to have conversations around sensitivity and awareness, and it's work that we all have to do. And so I appreciate both the offering yesterday and the offering today. And life is filled with these kind of struggles where good people with good intentions, sometimes there's space between intentionality and the impact. And sometimes the impact with the same intention is fantastic, and sometimes it falls short. And that's just part of being human. So thank you for being part and being vulnerable as a human, and for being creative as a human.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's take a look at this Mishnah today. And it's the 5th chapter. And here there's a little bit of a play on words. That yesterday we spoke about the 10 nisyonos, the 10 tests or trials, tribulations. And you'll notice here it starts with asar nisim. Yesterday we spoke out that the word nes as miracle is also the same root, the nun and the samich as test. Tests and miracles are the same. They're plural. It's interesting why nisyonos is in the feminine for tests. And nisim, miracles, are in the masculine. That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer, but it's worth thinking about. But this is how it reads: Asar nisim nasu laviseinu b'Mitzrayim v'asara al hayam. So there are 10 miracles that were given or done to our ancestors in Egypt, and another 10 at the sea. Eser makos Hevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu al HaMitzrim b'Mitzrayim, that there were 10 plagues that were brought by God on the Egyptians in Egypt. The Eser al Hayam, and additionally another 10 at the sea. Asar Nisyonos, there were 10 tests. Nisu Avoseinu es Hamakim Baruch Hu, and there were 10 kind of tests our ancestors had. I guess here's framed towards God. Nasu avisenu es hamakim. Hamakim is God. Bamidbar shenemar via nasu oisi zeh eser pamim v'lo shamu b'koili. Right? That this is God speaking. That they have tried me, God, these 10 times, and they have not listened to my voice. So there are a few things here that I think are really fascinating. One is the way in which, in relationship to God, it's reciprocal, right? That God tests us, and that we can also test God. God doesn't literally have nerves that we're testing God's nerves, but we are a stiff-necked people, and God has tried, like we said, to put this world in through 10 utterances. God whispered, we didn't listen. God then had to command through the 10 commandments. Even when God was like kind of yelling at us, it was scary. The commentators point out, the Gemara says, that when God spoke the first 2 of the 10 commandments, everybody died. Everybody died by the first one, and it was God revived everybody by the second. And part of that is that it was just the soul reunified with its source, and the body couldn't contain. But it was scary. People were trembling. There was thunder and there was fire, and it was scary. And in part because we think of the divine revelation as this great intimacy with God, and it's true. It was a marriage between us and God. but it was also on some level the result of all sorts of failures before that. That was not plan A, that wasn't plan B, right? God created the garden and then that didn't work and there was a flood. God started over, but Noah after the flood also failed. And it was one failure after the next. And so we also tested God as a nation, right? We're complaining how come there's no meat, the manna that fell down could taste like anything that we wanted it to, and it wasn't enough. And then people didn't have enough faith in God to pick up 2 portions on Friday, and they went out again on Shabbos. So like it's a never-ending. I don't want to say that like we are a never-ending disappointment to God, because that's not a healthy dynamic. But we have the potential to make the right choice, and when we don't, we fall short. God feels that. God experiences that. And so part of, I think, being successful in the test from God is to also feel that sense of responsibility that we don't want to disappoint. I'm sure I've mentioned, I had a Rabbi who used to always let us take the test over as many times as we wanted, because the goal was to get an A. And, the goal was to get to know the material. And I remember like I would want it to get 100, not because my parents were going to get my report card, they didn't care, but that I didn't want to disappoint. He tried so hard to teach us. I wanted to be a good student. I wanted to give him the pleasure of knowing that I was paying attention, that I was doing well. So when we think about a test from God's perspective, I think there's something really powerful in saying, God, listen, you know that really who I am is worthy of doing this thing that I know I shouldn't do. Like if it was just for me, I'm not that sensitive to my soul. I'm not that holy. I'm not that, I'm not so righteous. But I know that it means something to you for me to do this or not to do this. And so because I love you and because of my relationship with you, I don't want to disappoint you. So there's a way in which we can overcome the test by not wanting to disappoint the one who is testing us, right? And that's a different kind of dynamic in thinking about spirituality and religion as a relationship, right? To say that differently, the Sabbath, let's find a good example. Wool and linen is a biblical prohibition. The verse says you shouldn't put wool and linen together in a garment. The wool and linen is not particular. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't care. And the truth is, my body doesn't really care if it's wool, if it's linen, it's polyester. Some itch more than others. But in terms of recognizing that there's the God that says this doesn't make me happy, so I don't need to have an opinion on wool and linen. I could be completely agnostic. But because it's important to God, I can make it important to me. And sometimes when a person is tested in a way that really what I want is in opposition to what is understood to be God's will, then it's a function of, do I take what I think God wants and prioritizes it? Do I prioritize it? Or do I say, listen, that's great, God, that you told me not to get angry and to yell and to make somebody feel bad. But you have no idea how obnoxious this human is being. I can't hold myself back. I need, for my own sanity, to tell this person what a horrible human they are. So which one wins out there? Now, we should know that none of us need to do that. I just saw today, I don't know if this story is true, but I saw it today on Facebook, which is it's not this place where I get stories. The stories I say over, I heard from reliable sources, but I saw this thing posted. It was posted by a friend of mine, and I know him. So he told over a story of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein, we've quoted a lot. His son just passed away a couple of weeks ago. He was Rosh Yeshiva in the Lower East Side, MTJ, I think it's called, Mesiftas Feres Yerushalayim. And Rav Moshe was a big tzaddik. He was a big gadol. He was the biggest rabbi of the generation. And he passes away in the 1980s. So the story is said that there was another rabbi who was not a great rabbi, and really not staying in his lane, who was being very critical of Rav Moshe and publicly was saying that he wasn't in a position to have opinions, and really in a way that's like was not appropriate. And one day, a student at this yeshiva sees this rabbi who was making fun of Rav Moshe coming out of the building. So he quickly went to Rav Moshe, assuming that he was there to ask Rav Moshe for forgiveness. Like that's what he assumed, that the person regretted it and came to apologize. So this young student says to Rav Moshe, so he came to apologize, right? And so Rav Moshe says, no, he didn't come to apologize. So he said, he like came then for what? So he said, look, the truth is that he got fired and found another job, but the job would only give it to the employers. The potential employer would only give him the job if I wrote him a letter of recommendation. And so he came here to ask for a letter of recommendation. So the student says, okay, great, but like obviously apologized first, even if the motivation was only to get the letter of recommendation. So he said, no, he didn't apologize. So then the student said to Rav Moshe, so why in the world would you write him? Then he said, like, you didn't do it. The Rosh Yeshiva didn't do it, right? And he said, no, I did. And he said, why? Why would you do this? So Rav Moshe said to him, there's some people, and we saw this as a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, there's some people who acquire the next world in one moment. And for me, this was that moment, right? Now, Rav Moshe acquired all sorts of worlds and for learning. But there's a moment there that the human piece of us wants to say, what's wrong with you? Like, how do you have this audacity, right? This act itself is enough to warrant me writing a letter that no one should ever employ you. You're being a horrible, insensitive human. And that would have been for the benefit of the person. Like, we could justify, like, I don't know why you didn't have parents. I don't know why you didn't have teachers. I don't know why you didn't have a community that somehow, gave you an education to know how to be able to interact with other people. But now's the day where you're going to receive this education. You cannot be obnoxious to people, period. And especially when it's one of the leaders of the generation. And then to have the audacity. But Rav Moshe didn't do that. Rav Moshe felt that, like, this was, outside of him making fun of me, this was good. So I was doing this interview earlier today with somebody, and they wanted to know, like, how do you all right, that part isn't I don't need to talk so much about that. Sorry, I got distracted. The point is that we're meant to feel. We're meant to feel the way in which other people affect us. And part of what we're supposed to do with that is use it as sensitivity to understand that our actions also have an effect on God and on how God feels. So because we care about not doing things that go against the divine will, that can help us overcome the tests that often humans put before us, because humans can be the worst. Okay, want to pause there. There's a lot more to say on this Mishnah. The 10 plagues correspond, and the people that have, done work and showing how they're related to the 10 utterances, the 10 plagues, the 10 commandments. But we've said many times that Shabbos is both Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, a remembrance to the Exodus of Egypt, and also a remembrance to the to creation, because we weren't by creation, but our ancestors were by the Exodus of Egypt. And that really does become a stepping stone to be able, to believe God when God says that God created this world. So we have about 10 minutes before we're taking a break. So I did want to offer just more time for people who wanted to either ask questions on this or follow up on any other loose strings that we've had up until now. Yeah, Doug.
At the risk of making you repeat yourself, when I read these sayings all together, the number 10 seems to be the most important part of it rather than the lesson. And why is the number 10 repeated over and over, and why is that so important?
Beautiful. It's a great question, and it's this I don't even think is repetitive for people. The 10 represents a complete order, a complete segment, right? After you run out of new numbers after 9, right? 9 then is a 1 and a 0. So 10 represents the kind of the holistic, complete space, and that's why they're 10 commandments, because and the truth is, the rabbis tell us that all 613 commandments can be derived from these 10, and the Talmud goes into it, and it's really interesting which ones are derived from which. But when we think about the order of creation, that even though there were 6 days of creation in the creation of the space of the Sabbath, those 10 utterances is the complete spectrum of creation, meaning the complete built, all of the working pieces, right? In fact, there's another list of, I think it's 10, I have to check, of things that were created benishmashos, right at the twilight. The pit, the donkey for Bilam. There was like very specific things that were created in that twilight zone. So I think 10 represents, the 10 tests is really start to finish. Generally today we grade students 0 to 100, but instead of, so we understand 100% is the totality of something, but 100% is really, is 100 out of 100, but 100% is also 10 out of 10. right? It's the percentage of something. So these systems are in orders of 10. And so there's 10. And so this is the totality of that. There's probably better language. A Rebbe of mine wrote a book. I only got to hear, it wasn't such a close Rebbe, but there's a book called Jewish Wisdom in the Numbers. One of the authors, I know only one of the authors, is written by two people, Asher Chaim Levin and Rabbi Yeshua Hartman. Rabbi Yeshua Hartman is actually related to the Hartman of the Hartman Institute, but I believe it's like a cousin. But this Hartman is very well known for his work on the Maharal. The Maharal is of Prague, 1600s. I don't know where. It could be. I moved things around recently. I don't know what I did with it. But it's a blue set. It's on the Maharal is the Gur Aryeh on Chumash. Oh, it's right here. He also has on Pirkei Avot. So this Rabbi Hartman is a huge Talmud Chacham, and so Yeshua David Hartman is in Hebrew. But anyways, he's a very big Talmud Chacham. He's done a lot around the Maharal, and the Maharal happens to be more focused on numbers than most. So at the beginning of each number, he has a bit of an introduction. So on the number 10, it looks like he has about 8 pages. But just this is what he says for 10. 10 relates to an integrated system. It's a full set of individual parts combined to make up of a communal whole. This number typifies holiness and the resting place of the divine Shekhinah. For those of you who are familiar with the 10, different midos. And it's the pathways to reach spiritual perfection and the world to come. So that's what he has. But in his last list, he has the utterances of creation, the tests of Abraham, the 10 plagues, the 10 commandments. And then there are other sets of 10. There are 10 kings that have ruled over the known world, 10 non-Jewish nations that originally occupied the Holy Land. There were 10 sons of Haman, 10 levels of impurity, 10 biblical famines, 10 measures of qualities such as wisdom, beauty, etc. that descend to the world. There are 10 expressions of song, 10 expressions for prayer, 10 verses for each of the 3 blessings on Rosh Hashanah of the Musaf prayer, and also 10 authors of Tehillim. In sum, the 10 is the number through which a full range comes together as a collective whole unit. This represents the leap from private to public, from individual to communal. So it's a thick book. It's put out by ArtScroll. If you're looking for like traditional material on numbers, it's really great. They did a really good job with it. It's about 500 pages long, but that's what I.
So really doing each of these things 10 times just makes them significant, which they wouldn't have otherwise.
I would say that it's significant in that it's an indicator that it's a complete, right? It's a complete spectrum. It's a complete spectrum. Yes. Please, Randy.
Rabbi, this class has just been wonderful, and I feel like there's going to be a hole in my day now. So is there anything you could recommend for us to read, that's not too esoteric? Or
Yeah, that's a great question.
you can think about it. You don't have to.
Yeah, I would say, there are really great books, modern commentaries on Pirkei Avos, and it's less about the text and more about the interpretations. Rabbi Lau, the former chief rabbi who was just vaccinated, it's Amichai Lau's uncle. He was, I think, the first kind of rabbinic figure to get vaccinated. He's, if you want a tearjerker, a deep book, I mean, I couldn't get through the introduction. It was too powerful. And I think Eli Wiesel wrote one of the introductions there, but he has a book that's been translated into English. I believe it's called Out of the Depths. And he was the youngest person liberated from Buchenwald. And I believe he was there with Eli Wiesel. I think it was Herschel. I think it was Schachter was the American clergy person who was there. But that's a fantastic book just about at some point it becomes very biographical, but I found it deeply moving. And I think, so he has one, I would say anything by Lord Sachs. I'm a huge fan, less about, the depth of new, say that different. It's less scholastic in terms of the type of learning that I do, but it's very powerful in the persuasiveness of a pluralistic vision of humanity. And I believe that he wrote, he has a lot of books. I would be shocked if he didn't have. So I would say that there's some great things from Rabbi Sachs Zatzal. And what else are good things? Through Facebook, we're doing Mesilas Yesharim every morning, this live 15-minute teaching, and I see people's names there, and it's lovely to feel connected early in the morning with people. But I would say anything, if you want something that has really influenced me, I can't promise there isn't anything in there that isn't dated in terms of the language. So there might be things in there that could be said differently, but there's a great book called The Way of God. It's this is just until this class will pick up again. It's just
it just seems like a long.
Yeah, no, sorry. Somebody wrote in the comment, "Is it over forever?" It's not over forever.
No,
It's over for. I'm just responding to the thing. So there's a book. The translation was put out by Feldheim. It's called The Way of God, and in Hebrew it's called Derech Hashem. Particularly the first chapters that talk about God's goodness as the motivating factor for this world, and that God created this world to give us pleasure. I think it's the clearest organization of Jewish thought that we have that's available in English. So those are some of the suggestions. And if you want just something, if you're more into like history, there's a great 2-volume set that I recommend to every person who is who's thinking about converting to Judaism. It was translated by a Rebbe of mine, Rabbi Nachman Bullman. It's called The Book of Our Heritage. It basically goes through the calendar year. And so we have some things coming up on the calendar, but if you're interested in kind of like filling in the gaps of Jewish history around the calendar, that's also a great work. It could be the translations from the 60s or 70s. So like there might be some stuff there that I'm sure the patriarchy runs deep in the translation. But those are some suggestions of good kind of winter reading.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, please just unmute yourself and.
So I have thoroughly enjoyed. I've thoroughly enjoyed developing this image of God that's present and close, and that wants the best for us, and has feelings and whispers, and yet the anthropomorphizing at this point is getting to be really difficult for me. God as the principal, God as the executive director, God that was reviewing your report card. And so I'm wondering if you can offer, or if you have other ways of conceptualizing of God that other than as a very benevolent big brother, grandfather, whatever.
Yeah, sure. One of the truths that I've kind of been coming back to very frequently, several times a day, is that the language that we have to describe things is never going to be as expansive as the experience itself. So God is certainly not just a principle, nor is God just a parent. And certainly God is not just a father, right, or a mother. God is all things good. And we don't have any way of describing God outside of God, because there's no other God, right? There's no other, that's the one thing about God. God is the one. So, when Moses says, who are you? God says, I am who I am. And like, that's actually really helpful. It's really helpful because that's true, right? That is very true. God is God. I do think that in terms of trying to make it relatable, the different attributes of goodness, to say this differently, when we see something that's positive or motivating in the world, if it's really true and good and motivating, it has a source in the divine. So there are positive aspects of being a parent, positive aspects of being a teacher, positive aspects of being a sibling, positive aspects of being a child. those are, I think, meant to be spaces to kind of harvest out that aspect of God, of that relationship. So the anthropomorphizing is not because the image is helpful, but rather that which invokes the image is helpful. Does that make sense? That whenever we give expression to an image of God, we've already taken a step away from a more truthful place of a God without an image. But if we don't use these images, then we can't speak in a way that gives people a point of reference to try to understand what we're trying to talk about. And I know we've said this over, but the Maharal says this about Moses, that's what it meant that he was Arul Sefasayim, that he had a speech impediment, because if you experience God, you can't put that into words. So when we put into words, we're already not describing God. So I can say to you, yes, you're 100% right. And the Gemara acknowledges this, and it says that it speaks in Lashon B'nai Adam. It speaks in the way in which people speak. You know, I got a present from, somebody, right? So if we think about, God as a giver, right? So this is not our tradition, right? But if a person thinks about, Santa's giving gifts, like that's an image that people can relate to, like, oh, the excitement of receiving, right? So a person should have that excitement of receiving all the gifts that we have in the morning from God, right? But we don't need to think about God as Santa Claus, right? Like, does that make sense? Meaning yeah, go ahead.
But if the image that works for me, or my experience of goodness, of receiving, of undeserved gifts is, I think of that as coming from the earth. I think of that as nature. Am I then an animist?
No. So and again, and this is what I think is so beautiful about Judaism, is that the truth has been a perspective of the truth has been articulated by many. So the Zohar points out that nature, ha-teva, is the same numerical value as Elokim, because God absolutely is hidden and concealed in nature, that God is nature. Nature is God, right? The Ramchal says that no blade of grass can blow in the wind unless God says to this blade of grass, I want you to blow right now. So that's deep within the tradition. And for some people, right? I mean, look, a person experiences, if you can go outside and it's safe and you experience a breeze, and that feels like God kissing or hugging, or that's holy. That's, ruach is spirit, right? Spirit and wind, right? But for some people, talking about like the Holy Spirit, that's already language that has been offered by other religions, and it gets complicated. So what I would say to you is that, feel in with the heart, feel in with the soul. When you feel connected and you feel inspired and you feel drawn to good, so then you're on the right path. And not every path needs to have labels. And rarely do the good paths have that signage, right? The good paths are the ones that you're on because it feels like you're in the right spot. All right, friends, thank you so much. Until we meet again, please take care of yourselves, stay warm, and check in on each other. And until next time, my friends, you will be in my thoughts and prayers with so much gratitude. I appreciate the time that we've spent together.
Thank you.
Rabbi.